Hey, Chicago, what do you say? It's the CHGO Cubs Podcast, another beautiful sunny day in the Chicago area. It is the 9th of October. Cubs are not in the playoffs. That still has not changed. Some people didn't like our grades yesterday. We'll talk about that a little bit. Luke Stuckmeyer, Ryan Herrera, Cody Delmendo. The report cards continue today, and we've got a couple more for you. And, of course, we have the ex-Cub factor playing strongly, of course, in the playoffs as they continue without the Cubs. And teaser, Cody might have a new best friend. Cody might have a new best friend. Even he's wondering, what's going on? Where did I gain this friend? It's not from our grades because people are angry how we graded because they didn't listen and pay attention to the fact that these are our 2024 grades and not our grades of, is this a nice person? How did they do the last 5 years? How are they like? Social media wants to jump on the first thing they see and hear. And I understand that. But if you don't go listen to the podcast, you don't understand what we're saying. They're the 2024 grades. So today we will grade Sir Nico Hoerner at second base. And we will also grade Jordan Wicks, who's had a tough 2024 season. So we'll grade those two guys, but I want to start with the playoff stuff because the former Cub factor is alive and well. You know, we've seen the Schwarber lead off home runs. We've seen Castellanos get it done. Yesterday, it was Jeremiah Estrada, who the Cubs cast away and has turned into a pretty good, at times, dominant reliever for the Padres. He helps the Padres go up 2-1. What are you happy to see Estrada doing well for San Diego? Does it bother you at all? For me, it's like, listen, it's not like he was a superstar player when he was here. They found something, they used him correctly, and that's exactly what the Cubs have tried to do with some other players. So it's just kind of role reversal. This time it's a guy that wasn't working here. Now he's working there. The Cubs have done the same thing for some other pitchers. So for me, it's a wash. At the same time, yeah, I get it. Some people are a little bitter that Jeremiah Estrada is doing well for the Padres.
Yeah, I kind of look at it as in the same way. You know, if it was like a star bat, right? A guy that they had in the system and became a star bat and whatever.
Right. Schwarber.
Probably feel, yeah, the Schwarber could be part of that, right? Like you probably feel more, trying to think of the right word, but it probably means a little bit more is if it's a position player or even like an ace starter or whatever, you know, the starting pitcher, right? Like it's a reliever, and I get it. Like the bullpen the last couple of years probably could have used someone like Jeremiah Estrada, but remember at points in the last couple of years, Jeremiah Estrada was in the Cubs bullpen and wasn't having much success though. I think the fact that it's a reliever, you know, yes, it looks like a guy that the Cubs let get away, and a different organization was able to get him pitching well and pitching, you know, solid leverage innings in the playoffs against the Dodgers. Like that matters. But like you said, Luke, the Cubs have done that with other pitchers at various points over the last few years, like Nate Pearson among them could be a guy that they do that with, right? So I think it feels less impactful a reliever we're talking about, because we do know that, again, like credit to Jeremiah Estrada for doing what he's done, because a couple of years ago it didn't look like he'd get there just with some of the struggles he was having. But again, it's a reliever, and we know the volatility of the bullpens of relievers, right, of that position, and you can't necessarily count on guys every single year going out and doing what they did. So the key is to just continue to keep identifying good relief options. And yeah, it stinks for the Cubs probably to see Jeremiah Estrada going and having success with San Diego pitching in the playoffs, but I'm sure they're confident that they can go and find someone and develop their relievers themselves, right? Like Porter Hodge is a good example of it. Luke Little, before he got hurt, was an example of that they were starting to get their own relievers up through the system and into the majors, and they have to be confident they can be able to do that. Otherwise, you know, what are we doing here, right? So yeah, I don't. My main point is definitely stinks for the Cubs to see him going and having success, but the impact it doesn't impact my opinion of it as much. It feels like okay, good for him for me, more than like if it was a different, more impactful position.
I mean, I tend to agree with you, but at the same time, it's just like this goes into my thinking about Jed Hoyer. Like, it's how many times do we have to watch guys leave the Cubs and then go have success? All right. Like, I'm sick and tired of the way they evaluate players. How many more at bats do I have to watch Nick Madrigal take before they decide to cut ties with him? Like, why in the world have we had to deal with Nick Madrigal significantly longer than Jeremiah Estrada? And the thing is that we didn't even see Jeremiah Estrada until like the end of 2022. So it wasn't even a couple years, Ryan. It's literally 1 year, and he spent more than half of 2023 going back and forth from AAA and the Cubs. And I get it. He wasn't very good. So I understand the fact that, like, in hindsight, it looks bad. And I understand that. The point that I'm making here, though, is that when are the Cubs going to get something right with this on their side when it comes to a reliever, at least? The Cubs easily could have turned his career around. Now, I understand in some aspects, sure, maybe he needed a kick in the butt. That was something that I heard about when I was at spring training in Arizona this year, that, like, he wasn't someone who worked hard. He was someone that was kind of lazy. All right. That's what I was told from a few people out in Arizona when we were there in spring training. All right. Maybe he needed the kick in the butt. Sure. But at the same time, it's just he clearly had the stuff. He just hadn't developed enough. I just feel like we've seen enough players get longer leashes that you probably could have moved on sooner or traded sooner. And Estrada was 1 year. It was 1 year, not even a full year, really. So it's just, to me, at the end of the day, it's not the worst decision. It's not something that I'll look back on in 5 years, unless Estrada is consistently good for the next 5 years. It's not something I'll look back on and be like, this is why Jed Hoyer should be fired. That's not the point. The point is that I just would like to see this role reversed for the Cubs and it lead to actual winning. Because, yeah, I know they've picked up some diamonds in the roughs. Julian Merriweather in 2023, right? I get it. But none of it has led to winning. None of it. That's the point.
The point is we're talking about Jeremiah Estrada, though. I just think we're like relievers. Again, like reliever, like there's no guarantee Jeremiah Estrada does anything to this level next season, right? It's just the nature of the position. The Cubs. The point is, even at like even had Jeremiah Estrada had a really good season with the Cubs in 2023, and they kept him around. There's no guarantee he has a great season this season for him, right? Like that's just the nature of the position, especially when you're talking about young relievers. So I think the main point is just, as the Cubs or any other team, like you have to consistently, obviously evaluate them correctly, but like consistently find and identify good relief options. Like that, it's the point of bullpens in baseball at this point, is just that you can't necessarily trust. There are very few relievers in baseball that you can trust from a year-to-year basis. So it's just continuing to identify the right guys and build bullpens with depth. And like that's the main point versus anyone individually.
At the same time, like the same time too, though, Ryan, is like, okay, Porter Hodge, like we're all high on him. He was good for half the year that he
might not be good next year.
But he might not be good next year. What if Estrada's good next year and Porter Hodge sucks? I hope he doesn't. He's been on the show. He's a friend of the program. It's just like, you have to look at it from both sides. Like it just,
I am looking at it from both sides.
It doesn't feel like it. It feels like anyone else isn't doing that either. It's like it's strictly from our point of view, from the outside looking in. It's a bad look. It's a bad look. Period.
I'm not saying it's not.
I agree with both you. Cody's right. When he goes out there and he has all these scoreless innings and he's striking guys out left and right, and you're sitting there at that time in the season, you're going, our bullpen is the reason we're terrible this year. It's bad when you just let a guy go away and now he's turned into one of the more reliable arms in baseball, at least for this season. Doesn't mean it's going to happen next year, but it is a bad look for your evaluation of players that you were like, we can't fix this guy. Okay. And he left and he's great.
Now, it's not a good look. Another thing too, it's like, they put him on waivers because they didn't have to do with 40-man things related to the 40-man.
I believe they non-tendered him.
Right. So like I understand the situation with trying to decide which player you were going to have to waive or whatever, but I feel like, and we say this a lot, like this team at the time that they put him on waivers, this team won 83 games, man.
He was non-tendered, I'm pretty sure.
Whatever. Like the point is that it's not like the roster was full of a bunch of stars or whatever. I feel like it shouldn't be so hard to have to decide with this stuff, man.
Yeah, I'm afraid Daniel.
And again, in general, I don't really care that he has gone on to San Diego and has success. Clearly, he went to San Diego, and if you just look at his pitch usage, they've changed that, and that has helped him have success. Yeah. Maybe he doesn't do that with the Cubs. Maybe I should be more critical of the Cubs coaching staff or something. I don't know. And I'm still high on their infrastructure internally in terms of pitching development and stuff like that. I am. But it's just, if I'm going to give them a ton of credit for what they have done in a positive direction, then I can't hold back on them when things like this happen. If they want to be one of the best, if they want to consistently be a good organization, they have to be better with these types of decisions. They just have to. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Javi Baez walked into the Tigers clubhouse. Apparently, he's out for surgery, but apparently it was like this huge motivational boost for the Detroit Tigers. Everybody in the clubhouse still loves him. Yada yada yada. So there's the ex-Cub factor. He's doing the equivalent of the Hayward speech, right? Like he's not doing it on the field. He's doing it off the field for the Tigers. And then on the other side, you had Schwarber getting a couple of walks. But did you see what Jesse Winker said? The former Brewer went out and he was asked about, he was booed in Milwaukee when they were playing Milwaukee. He was booed at the end of last season. And Jesse Winker said in an article recently, quote, "They pay the tickets. They are the veins and lifeblood of our sport, but I will hate the city of Milwaukee forever." Does that make him Cody's new best friend? He will hate Milwaukee. He's become the new villain number one in Milwaukee.
This is what you were talking about? I was very confused.
He said he hates Milwaukee. You can't stand the Brewers. They almost killed Greg Braggs.
They did almost, like, it's not even like
I'm not even
joke.
exaggerating. They almost
tore both
Greg
ACLs
Braggs
at their ballpark. Yes.
Also, Cody, by the way, actually, I think you were right that he was put on waivers, not non-tendered.
Credit
it was right
to
around
you
the
for
same.
giving me some credit. It's a very rare thing.
I always give credit. I have. What's the word?
Man of integrity.
Man of integrity. There you go. I've never not been. I've always given you credit if you deserved it.
No Big J has more integrity than the Mizzou alums. There, I said something nice.
There you go.
I mean, Jesse Winker, I've enjoyed his emotion that he's shown in the playoffs. I'll say that much. I don't know. I mean, I think it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious that he and the Brewers fan base are not exactly fans of each other. So, and didn't he play there? Like, there's a reason behind all that, right?
Willie Adames, after they hit in the playoffs, Willie Adames tried to fight him in the parking lot.
Right.
Now, I'll take Willie Adames' side on that if Willie Adames signs to play third base for the Cubs next season. We'll see how that whole thing unfolds. We're going to get to our report cards in a second. Again, it's Nico Hoerner. I see the live YouTube chat is up and going, and they have already started firing in their grades, which we appreciate. But first, Cody's going to tell us about one of our great partners.
Is it Circa Sports, Luke?
Yes, it is, Cody. I can't find it, so I'm going to have you do that.
Okay, because it has your name on here, so I thought you were going to read it. So I'm just making sure I'm looking at the right thing.
Something weird is happening with my computer.
Circa Sports, right? Whether it's pro or college, the app to bet football or playoff baseball is Circa Sports Illinois. Circa Sports, it's sports betting the way it should be. Circa Sports Illinois has high betting limits, low holds, and exceptional customer service. Bet on all your favorite teams in every game this season. Spreads, props, futures, or in-game. Circa Sports has it. Fund and bet like a pro from anywhere, anytime in Illinois. Download your new bookie today at circasports.com. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Jordan Mason over rushing yards tomorrow, Thursday Night Football.
Nice. While you go and put your bets in with Circa, I also want you to go and buy some Shady Rays, because our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company offering a world-class product rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures. They have hundreds of options to choose from, so you're bound to find the perfect pair to match your style. They probably have a style in your favorite team's colors. I said it yesterday, but the Black Timber Shady Rays, like they're simple looking, but they look so nice. Just I like I said, I put in a new order yesterday or the other day. I'm waiting for them to come in, and I'm going to bring them onto the show next time as soon as I get them.
They go great with your camo CHGO hoodie.
Oh yeah, for sure.
See?
Look at that.
Yeah.
But one of the good things is if your shades ever go missing or take an unexpected hit, don't sweat it. Shady Rays has the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair is backed by lost or broken replacements. And now if you don't love your shades, exchange for a new pair or return worry-free within 30 days. There's no risk when you shop. Their team always has your back with personal and fast support. So exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com and use code CHGO for 35% off polarized sunglasses. That's code CHGO at shadyrays.com for 35% off. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people.
Very nice. Thanks for the save there, Cody. I do have my computer back, so I should be all right. Hopefully.
I was just kind of like, what am I supposed to read?
I'm keeping you on your toes. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm keeping you on your toes. I swiped somewhere and the whole screen went off my computer. This is why I can't have electronics.
We got a good look at what it's like to watch Luke Stuckmeyer do technology there, folks.
That's right.
And this is what we call him, Grandpa Stucky.
And also ad-lib. Right? Just ad-libbed it over to you. Cody, take it away.
Take it away. I'm like, okay, Luke, let me tell you about Circa Sports.
Let me tell you about Nico Hoerner. That's our next report card. We're going over to Nico, and I guess it depends on how you want to look at his season. I think a lot of people have identified Nico as a possible trade target in the offseason if the Cubs are going to have to trade somebody off their major league roster or create some space. And I don't think it's because most fans don't like him. I still think he's very popular in the fan base. It's just that they seem to have other infielders coming up in the system that might be able to replace him and potentially provide a bigger bat. Now, you can also look at it and say he did exactly what he was supposed to do again this season, just like we did with Ian Happ, right? But we're basing this on this grade is just 2024, whereas when we were doing Jed Hoyer, it was 2024, but you also had to factor in moves he was making for the long-term good of the Chicago Cubs. So he's the only one that's a little bit different. This is a 2024 grade. Now, projected FWAR was 4 for Nico Hoerner. He ended up with a 3.9. Projected home runs, 10. He ended up with 7 home runs. Batting average, 276. He hit 273. WRC plus, 106. He ended up with a 103 WRC plus. His stolen bases were down. Those are pretty close. He's under on each of those projections, right? But he's pretty close.
It's like a minuscule amount, you know.
I will say the home runs thing is frustrating. It's frustrating as a fan because I sit there and watch him and I don't understand why there can't be more power. And when it seemed early in the season like he was maybe trying for that power, I don't know if that ever was the case, but when he tried, it didn't go well. And when he got back to being Nico Hoerner, which is less power, get on base, play Gold Glove second base. Although even I believe, Ryan, you can double check me on this, or Cody, I think his defensive metrics were down just a little bit this year, right? He wasn't quite as good at second base. I'm just going to give him a B. And it's because he's right around project. it's not his fault he did exactly what the numbers said he was going to do this season. If the Cubs want to go out and say, hey, Nico is projected to hit 10 home runs, but we want him to hit 20 this year. Well, that's all great. But if the guy's career is showing you he's going to hit less than 10 home runs or right around 10 every year, you can hope and wish all you want. So I could go lower on my grade because I'm disappointed that his career kind of hasn't elevated each year, but he does do all the things the right way, and he did reach his projections. He is what he is. He is not a perfect player, but if you put big money players around him, he's a great fit on a team. You could see him having a huge impact in any of these playoff games. Huge impact just with his glove. The difference is the Cubs don't have Manny Machado, and they don't have Tatis, and they don't have Ohtani, and they don't have, like, go on and on and on. That's the problem. The problem isn't that Nico Hoerner isn't one of those guys. I don't think he's ever going, like, by now we should know that he's not going to be one of those guys. So my grade is a B.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think most of the things you said is kind of how I feel about Nico. Like, he's never, I said going into the season, I thought he could add more power, and I think that was part of it, is wanting to get more power into his game. But that's like my own expectations, right? Like, that's just me kind of well wishing that he was going to add some more power. Like, I think reasonably to expect him to all of a sudden become, or just add a bunch more power. It's not like, what am I trying to say? Like, again, it's me like well wishing that versus like an actual expectation. I think I think he was down in a lot of offensive categories. I think even defensively he was down a little bit as far as like his defensive rating. But like we said, it was compared to his projections, compared to his numbers last year, with the amount, it wasn't a huge amount. Like, he was a pretty similar player to where he was last season. I'm trying to look up the defensive numbers, like where he ranks as far as like second baseman. Like, I think he's got a good shot at winning a Gold Glove. He may actually win another Gold Glove again this season. He was Nico Hoerner, so like, it wasn't a stellar season by any means, and he did have a long stretch offensively where he wasn't hitting very well. I think he did a good job of getting out of that and hitting a lot better over the last few weeks of the season. But it ended up being a pretty similar season to Nico Hoerner last year, right, where we thought he did a really good job. So, yeah, my grade's a B as well. I think it was a good Nico Hoerner season. I would like to see better, and that's obviously why he's not at an A. But you know, it was a Nico Hoerner season. He's a defensive guy. He's gonna put the ball in play a lot, hopefully get on base a lot. He's not gonna hit for a lot of power, a lot of slug, but that's not his fault. It's not his job, really. It's not his role, I should say, to be hitting with a lot of slug in this lineup like that. There should be plenty of other players around him that are going to be the ones driving him in, instead of vice versa. But I can already see the chat's not agreeing with us, but that's how I felt about it.
Well, I knew the Godfather would be thrilled with 2 Bs when I saw that you were a B and I was a B. Honestly, if I was just grading him and comparing him to other second basemen in baseball, then I am talking a C or lower, right? It was very mid. It was average. There's some players in baseball where second base has become sort of a star position. He's a good defensive player. He's just not a superstar.
Well, it's funny that you.
It was near pretty much 4-WAR player again. Like, we know that's a really solid player right there. We're putting up 4-WAR, and I think there's James maybe in the chat is kind of saying that we overrate WAR or whatever. No, like WAR is a good stat to determine where Nico Hoerner kind of falls among his peers, and he had a good Nico Hoerner season. Again, it was down a little bit from last season, but he had almost a 4-WAR. Like, that's a really good season from him.
Look, it's funny that you bring up other second basemen in baseball, and Nico Hoerner actually ranks among some of the best second basemen in baseball. Yeah. So to say that he's mid among some of the best second basemen in baseball is actually factually wrong. Are
you telling me I'm wrong?
I am telling you you're wrong, respectfully. A lot
Wait
of people
a minute now.
A lot of people don't want to do it respectfully, but I am telling you respectfully that you're wrong. All right.
Okay, I'll accept that.
among second basemen in baseball, he's tied with Jose Altuve and Fangraphs WAR at 3.9. All right. So Ketel Marte and Marcus Semien were the only 2 second basemen in baseball that were qualified that had a higher WAR than him. All right. Now, related to the chat, I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of what they're saying. I just think what Luke said regarding like the team and how it was built, like that's not Nico Hoerner's fault. I agree that if the Cubs had traded him to the Dodgers, right? He was kind of quietly in trade talk before the deadline, right? And the Dodgers needed a second baseman. They end up going and get Tommy Edman instead, right? And who's now playing shortstop, I think, because Gavin Lux played well enough to go back to second base. But they needed an infielder, right? I think if you put Nico Hoerner on the Dodgers with the lineup that they already have, will his numbers be better than Tommy Edmonds? I don't know. All I know is that he probably would show even more value than he already does with the Cubs. And this goes back to why Jed Hoyer gets an F for me, because it's like the way the roster is built, it's not his fault. We all know. We've all known for 2.5, now 3 years what Nico Hoerner is. And we keep hoping. We keep hoping that the power will take a step, even though outside of 1 year, he hit 10 home runs. 1 year. All right. Like we all keep hoping that maybe he could be a 15 to 20 home run guy. All right. But he just isn't. So am I going to knock a guy for not hitting 15 to 20 homers when he's never proven to do it? No. Like they need more slug, but that's not his fault. He's doing what he knows how to do. Did he try to include more slug into his game this year based off the swing changes in spring training in the beginning part of the season? Yeah, I guess. And outside of September, I would say, like, if he didn't have the September he had, I would say that my grade would probably be in the C range for the season. But he had a great September, and his numbers looked more like his numbers at the end of the year. But at the same time, it was a down year for him. I want to say if I go back to last year, I probably gave him an A. This year, I'm giving him a B+ just because he's still ranked among the top second basemen in baseball. That is what it is, man. Like, I don't know how I can go lower whenever he still put up a really good second baseman year for him. You know, like, you need more offense, no doubt. But the reason that it's not an A for me like it was last year is that his numbers were down offensively for him this year. He was top 10 in hits last year. He was not top 10 in hits this year. Even his slugging percentage was down compared to last year, which I don't know how much lower he can go. That I think the biggest why a lot of fans are down on him is because he's just he is a better version offensively and defensively of Nick Madrigal. All right. And despite the fact that he had a down year, he still stole 30 bases. He still finished the year hitting 270, and he gives you Gold Glove defense. I just think the way the roster is built is not his fault. So I don't know, man. Like, I sit here and I don't necessarily disagree with some of what the chat's saying, but at the same time, I think a lot of people were hoping that he would be more, but we've gotten 2+ years of basically the same thing. So I think I would go lower, but then I also feel like that's wrong just because last year I believe I gave him an A. And this year, he basically put up the same season, but some of the numbers were lower than last year. So I feel like that's wrong for me to give him a C. Like my first thought was to give him a C. Like, just pure base off. Like, first reaction when you said yesterday that we're going to do Nico today, I was like, he's getting a C for me. And then whenever I looked at what he's doing among second basemen in baseball, it's like, maybe I should appreciate him more. So, again, it's not his fault that the Cubs don't know how to build a roster, or Jed Hoyer doesn't know how to build a roster.
All right, we're going to talk more Nico Hoerner in a second. Then we'll get to Jordan Wicks. I want to get to some of the comments in the live YouTube chat. We'll talk about that in a second. But first, I want to tell you that we are indeed sponsored by the Chicago Sports Network. The Chicago Sports Network, the new home of the Blackhawks, Bulls, and White Sox games, CHSN, will broadcast more than 300 live games per year across the Blackhawks, Bulls, White Sox, and will feature a full lineup of original Chicago-focused sports content. They're also Chicago-based, Chicago-built, and Chicago to the core. And they're bringing it to every corner of Chicago across our 77 neighborhoods and beyond at CHSN. Chicago comes first. Visit chsn.com for more information on how you can watch the Bulls, Blackhawks, and White Sox games all season long. The Hawks off to a rough start with their season opener last night, but yeah, they have a new home, and that's where you can find them, Chicago Sports Network.
You know what I'm going to need after reading these comments the last 48 hours? A blue moon, man.
I know it.
These people just make me want to drink.
So responsibly, of course.
Responsibly, obviously responsibly. Yes. All right. It's a new baseball season deserves a bold, unique beer from its refreshing flavor with Valencia orange peel for a subtle sweetness and hints of coriander. Blue Moon Belgian style wheat ale is a one-of-a-kind beer that's made brighter. It's carefully crafted and full flavored with refreshing notes and a smooth, creamy finish. Blue Moon was brewed by baseball to give you a dose of nostalgia and get you excited for the new season. Blue Moon isn't just another beer. It's a whole different experience. Why strike out with the same old beer when you can get something one of a kind? It's a bold flavor, bright explosion of color, and iconic orange slice ritual guarantee a one of a kind beer experience, perfect for spring weather, fall weather, winter weather, any weather, summer weather. I skipped that one. All right. This beer only comes around once in a blue moon, but you can enjoy it all season long. Bring the ballpark to you with Blue Moon Belgian style wheat ale. It's one of a kind every time. Get Blue Moon delivered by visiting get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO to see your delivery options. That's get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO. Blue Moon made brighter. Celebrate responsibly. Blue Moon Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
The live YouTube chat about Nico Hoerner, Eye of Ghost, says would be difficult, if not impossible, to replace his glove at the same price point. See Ruby 23, not blaming Nico, but I'd rather see Matt Shaw next year because he might be able to hit. I'll sacrifice some fielding for one of the infielders to be able to hit. James Colstock says having a 4-WAR player, but 100-ish WRC plus shows the advanced stats need some context.
That's fair.
I would say I don't.
He was still top 10 in WRC plus among second basemen too, though. Like it for his position. All right, like there are few players at that position that stick out like above everyone else. And this year I would say it was Ketel Marte that was the best second baseman in baseball. Right, Jose Altuve 127 WRC plus. Brendan Donovan, 115. Luis Garcia Jr., 111. Right. And then from number 5 to number 9 for second baseman in baseball, they were between 110 and 100.
Wow.
And Nico Hoerner was number 9 at 104. Again, the September for sure helped it. And whether you want to think that the Cubs were in it in September or not, he was an average hitter all season long with a hot September, right? But he still ended up as a top 10 second baseman in baseball, man. Like, I don't, even offensively, as much as it's frustrating that he hasn't provided more slug, these are the numbers. I don't know what else to tell y'all. I think it comes down to just more and more people disappointed that he hasn't taken a bigger step offensively.
I agree with that. Bleacher Report in the preseason back in early March, they ranked all the second basemen in baseball. They had him as the 9th best second baseman in baseball. That's probably fairly close. He might even be slightly better than that. What Cody, I think what you're saying is it's very true about this Cubs team in general, and it sort of goes back to what we said. I understand that Godfather and other people in the chat and other people on social media look at it and say everybody should get an F for a grade because this team didn't make the postseason. Everybody failed. But if we're just grading individuals, if you want to grade, hey, the team didn't get there, everybody gets an F, that's one thing. I understand that. But if we're just grading individual players, some of these guys did exactly what they were supposed to. Some were slightly above, some were slightly above. It's what we've been saying. They have a lot of nice to good players. They don't have a guy that's top 3 at his position anywhere. Like, that doesn't exist. They don't have the superstar player, but I can't necessarily, unless I'm grading them on just a superstar. Are they a superstar? That's the only way you get an A. The problem is all of these nice things don't. It's like having, I had a pretty good hamburger. They were nice French fries, but it didn't add up to the best meal I've ever had. It was still, some of the things were good, but the dessert wasn't very good. And what added up, I left with a stomach ache. Like, you know what I mean? The good players and nice seasons aren't adding up to something. That's a Jed Hoyer problem. That's not an individual player problem. And I am curious what you guys think about what C. Ruby 23 said. Not blaming Nico, just would rather see Shaw next season. I have felt that. Do I think Nico is replaceable at second base? Yes. But I also see the stats that Cody's putting out there and the facts that are out there. And I say, also, we have to be careful what we wish for. Sooner or later, they're going to have to pick a position to change some things up at, right? But there's no guarantee that Matt Shaw is coming to the major leagues and is instantly going to have massive success and hit 25 home runs. Like, just because we hope he is, that's the exact thing that C. Ruby said. He might be able to hit. Okay. He also might not. It's dangerous. I'm for the gamble sometimes. I'm just saying the Cubs better get it right. Whatever they decide to do, the bold move, make it. It's got to be right.
Yeah, I think that's a fair viewpoint or a fair want to ask for, right? I kind of liken it to, we talked about Bellinger, was that last week or whatever, as far as like, the Cubs can let Bellinger go. And maybe that ends up being the right move, but they have to figure out a way to not just replace his production and what he brings to the team, but also probably exceed that. Like whatever that return is on letting Bellinger go, or however they plan to replace Bellinger, like it's got to replace the production, if not exceed it. Otherwise, in some ways, you've taken a step back, right? I think the same is true with Nico. Like I think we're all high on Matt Shaw, right? I think everyone is, and it's quite possible that his best position moving forward in the major league level is second base. Obviously, Nico Hoerner is standing in the way of that. Maybe Matt Shaw ends up being better than Nico, and they take if they trade Nico or whatever, and Matt Shaw can surpass him, like that's great for the Cubs, right? But like you said, Luke, they have to be right on that. They have to make sure that if they're going to get rid of Nico, if they're going to trade him, or if they're going to trade Nico, they have to make sure that whatever they get back, whatever their plan is to fill in for Nico to replace his production, whatever their plan is, and it's got to be able to at least at the minimum replace what Nico gave you, if not surpass that. And there's no guarantee when you're talking about a minor league player. There's no guarantee.
Let's just use two players who are in the postseason right now for a team that we've talked a lot about. All right, Luis Arias and Jake Cronenworth. Now, Arias has been playing first base in the postseason. I don't know how many games he's been playing first base, but and they've put Cronenworth at second as well. They're both qualified hitters here that are on Fangraphs, and we're talking about a lot of the chat again about slug. All right, for the year. Arias in 150 games. Now this goes back to with Florida as well, or Miami, 392 slug. So under 400. And we would all consider him one of the better pure hitters in baseball. He's not a slug guy, never has been designed as a slug guy, but he did win the batting title. Like what? Not this year, but the year before. Mm-hmm. He still hit 314 this year. Right. And then Jake Cronenworth, who actually did have some slug this year, 17 homers. He only slugs still, though, 390. You know what I mean? Like, all I'm saying is that, again, many people are disappointed that Hoerner hasn't hit more home runs or slugged more. But there are other players that I think just you throw the name out there, you probably think are better hitters than Nico Hoerner. And I just gave you two of them. And sure, Arise at a higher batting average. I will say that for Nico to be more valuable, he's got to hit closer to 280 to 300 like he did last year. And he hit more like 250 this year. And so I think that's a big part why he ended the season like 273 or whatever. But for a large majority of the season, he hit like 250. He wasn't
hitting that one.
Right? So for a player like him who doesn't slug, he's got to hit closer between 280 and 300. So,
and we know he's not a guy that walks a lot either. Like he doesn't take a high percentage of walks.
So, I mean, I'm just saying that, like, for second base in general around the league, there are a lot of teams that would be happy to have a guy like Nico Hoerner. If you just look at the top 10 second basemen in baseball, which you can easily make the argument that he should be considered on that list, even after a year where we all feel like it was a down year. And even I feel like it was, right? But like, if you just, again, look at the numbers, it's like, wow, it was way better than I expected. On top of the fact that, like, he probably will win another Gold Glove. So it was a lot better than what my eyes were telling me, I guess. But numbers are numbers, man. I'm told that all the time. Anytime I try to bring up Delmetrics.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think part of what some of the players will feel is the stink of losing and not getting to the postseason in a bad division rubs off on everybody, right? And so we're all looking for places to improve this team. And I think what Cody is trying to say is Nico is not a perfect player, but he has great value to the right team. And that team could be the Cubs. Don't get me wrong. All they got to do is go get Juan Soto. Nico Hoerner's impact on the game is way less hurtful to fans. You're not going to be upset that Nico has this if he's getting on base and he's playing great defense and he and Dansby are turning double plays. If you got Juan Soto hitting 40 home runs, it changes the whole team. It changes everything, especially if PCA comes in and plays well, especially if Michael Busch continues. It's a lot of what ifs. And I don't think any of them are likely. So most people are saying, all right, where are you going to improve a position? It's not easy to improve Nico's defense, but could you improve the power just by playing Shaw there? Maybe. We think so. And the other factor is if you want to go get a good player, if you want to get Vlad Guerrero, which the chat has been talking about, which we started last year, credit to us. If you want Vlad Guerrero to be your DH or your first baseman or whatever you want to put him at, and you want him to be the superstar bat that you're going to get, the Toronto Blue Jays are going to want players back that make them better. So remember, what Cody is saying is he does have value. That's one of the reasons that I think a lot of people say Nico could be one of the guys that's traded, not because the Cubs necessarily think he's a bad player. In order to get a great superstar player, you're going to have to give some of your best prospects, and you're going to have to give them good major league talent. I'm not saying great major league talent, good major league talent. And that's why Nico has this big asterisk next to him this offseason. Because if you're looking to make a big trade, there are a lot of teams, as Cody said, that would say, hey, Nico Hoerner might be a real nice addition to our lineup, and he'd be a great addition to our defense. And you know what? He might be exactly what we need because we already have those superstar players or those power bats. That's why if Nico gets traded, he would be traded, not because he is a bad baseball player.
And I'm like, I'm someone who, like, I guess tried to have the conversation after the deadline too. Like, I remember the show sitting, I think it was one of the rare shows I was sitting in the middle. Maybe Ryan was at the ballpark. I don't know. And we had someone else join us, maybe whatever. I brought up the conversation of, well, they didn't really technically sell. And now you're in a situation where Nico Hoerner is someone you could still move in the offseason. And like, all I'm saying is that you can certainly get some really good value for him, but I'm curious of what that player is. I think that that's something that you have to, like, you figure out, or you decide how you feel about that if they do trade him, depending on the player they get back. I love Shaw. Like Ryan said, we all like Shaw, but to throw him into the fire in 2025 in a season that, well, you just you disappointed your fans in not making the playoffs this year.
In a season that's like playoffs or bust, right?
Right.
It's kind of playoffs or bust at this point.
That's a massive risk. That might be the biggest risk that the front office could play. And this is a risk-averse front office that I think needs to make more bold moves, but I don't necessarily think that's the right move. I think that you can find a way to use Shaw like, they did Javi Baez in 2016, where he played a little third, he played a little short, he played a little second base. Somehow, some way was able to get, 300 or 400 at bats out there. I don't know how they'll do it, but that I would rather see that than be able to mix him in with Nico still on this roster than trade Nico just to throw Matt Shaw into the fire. Unless you're trading Nico to bring in that power bat somehow, some way,
Nico's got to be, if you're going to trade Nico, if the Cubs are going to trade Nico, it's got to be a package for a bigger star player, right? Like it's like you're not at a point where you're trading Nico Hoerner for prospects anymore, for farm system guys, or even like unproven guys. Like you're not trading one for a couple of others, right? Like if you're going to trade Nico's got to go into some pack, whether it's Vlad or some guy we're not even talking, whatever it is. If you're going to be trading Nico, it's got to be in a package for one of those guys, because you like we're talking about, you're at a point where you got to make the playoffs next year for Jed Hoyer, right? And I'm not saying Jed Hoyer's got to go all in next season to try to save his job. Like I don't think that's how he generally thinks about it either. But it's also like that's it's kind of a reckless thing to do on your way out. But like whatever. But I'm saying like they kind of got to make the playoffs next season. And if you're going to trade a guy who's an established major league, a Gold Glove defender, probably doesn't give you the bat quite what you want yet, but is in a better lineup, fits in there well, just along with the base running, which I think is, some people have said it's mid base running. I think he's a lot better than people are giving him credit for. Plus the Gold Glove defense, like there's a lot of value in that for a team that's trying to make the playoffs. So if you're going to trade him in a season where you need to make the playoffs, it's got to be for someone it's got to be in the package for someone that you look at as more on the level of a star than the other way around.
Okay, let's move on to Jordan Wicks. Jordan Wicks won't take me very long because Jordan Wicks just wasn't around very much. 11 games, 10 starts, just 46 innings for the Cubs this year. He had a forearm strain early in the season. Then he had a right oblique injury that took him out for a couple of months. Then he had that oblique injury again. This is what I would just call a lost year for Jordan Wicks.
Yeah.
Right? We were hoping he was going to be the fourth or fifth starter and establish himself as an innings eater for the Cubs. And we talked to him at Cubs convention, and he was primed to go do that. His body failed him this year. I don't want to give a player a grade just based on injuries. And I would say, for me, Wicks was, even when he didn't pitch well, with his ERA was almost 6 when he did pitch in those 40-plus innings. It wasn't good. But the guy had an oblique injury and a forearm strain basically all season long, off and on. So I'm just going incomplete. I can't even grade him. If you want me to grade him and say injuries are part of the game, then it's a D or an F, because it was a terrible season for him. But I don't want to grade him on injuries, so I'm just going to go incomplete. It's a lost year. It's a disappointing year, but it's an incomplete on the card. He's got to take the season over again. He's got to take 7th grade all over again, because that's what happened.
No, I felt the exact same way before we even, like when we talked about yesterday who we were going to do, we decided on Nico and Wicks. Like, I'm like, Wicks is an incomplete for me. Like what'd you say? He pitched 11 times, started 10 of them, I think. He had
10 starts.
He had 5 starts. What was it? 4 or 5 starts, or whatever it was to start the year. There was a couple in there that weren't very good. I remember there were a couple in there that were. And then he gets hurt with the forearm strain. He's down for a month and a half. And so you're talking about a guy like comes in off spring training, gets, we know some guys start slow off spring training. That's just kind of how baseball works. They got to get into things. He gets hurt a month into the season. He's out for a while. And then he comes back, has to re-ramp up. So it's, in a way, especially with how long he was out, in a way, kind of like a second spring training, a mini second spring training where he has to ramp back up, get back in game shape, get ready, and go. Comes back, pitches once out of the bullpen. I think he was solid out of the bullpen. Then makes one more start, and then hurts his oblique, as you said, Luke. And then he's out for another almost, it was like 2 months, 2.5 months. I think it was until the end of August, early September when he finally came back. And he pitched 4 more times and then got hurt after like 17 days, I think it was. Like, so he had like 3 spring trainings in one season, kind of just with all the time he had to miss and sit, especially with the oblique, because the oblique's like a thing where I remember talking to him once, and it was, you can't really do anything until the oblique is good. Like if it was like an arm thing, at least you could still do leg workouts and stuff like that. Stay in some kind of shape, right? With an oblique, you kind of just got to wait until the pain or until the injury kind of goes away with the oblique, because you don't want to, you can do it, you can hurt it again in a lot of different ways, and you don't want to do that. So it really was kind of like 3 separate ramp up periods in one season for him, considering all the times he missed. And he went on the IL 3 times. Like for especially for a young guy. And I don't know if that holds any more weight than like if I'm looking at it as a veteran who missed a lot of time. Like that'd probably get an incomplete for me too. But especially for a young guy who we like sat here and we're like, oh, this is a season for him to prove himself or prove if he's a part of the rotation or not this season. I don't think we sit here a year later, 6 months later, and really have any idea if he's a part of the rotation or not in the future, because he didn't stay healthy. He didn't really prove anything, good or bad, because he missed so much time. And even the time that he did pitch, a lot of it was kind of like first or second starts back until he got hurt again. It was a lot of missed time for me. Like I can't really grade him on this season because we just don't have a lot to work off of.
Cody,
well,
how you feeling?
I decided to give a grade to be different, to be honest with you. Like I gave him a D. And one thing neither of you said is the best ability is availability. And I get it. Like I get both of your perspectives. Like, and again, I don't even really disagree, but even when he did pitch before he got hurt, I wasn't very impressed. He first 4 starts of the year, he couldn't get through 5. His best start was against Houston. Was able to go 6 innings, and then that's whatever happened between the moment that start ended until whenever, after that start, he got hurt. And then, I don't disagree. I gave a grade for the sake of giving a grade. I'm disappointed, but largely just because I wouldn't say I had high expectations for him this year, but I was hopeful that he would be able to eat innings for them. And his injury was a domino effect to the rest of the pitching staff, man. And so, now you go into another offseason with him, and you're going to have the same questions about him going into 2025, when you really, if you're Jed Hoyer, if you're the Cubs, you're with all the pressure from not only the fan base, but the media and everyone else. It's like, there's not a lot of room to wiggle around in terms of development and stuff. Like you need to start winning, and you need to start winning now. And so for me, when I factor all that in, I wasn't going to fail him just because like it is what it is. Like he was hurt a lot, but I mean, I also just wasn't impressed with what we saw at all when he did pitch either. So I am optimistic about him in 2025 though. I'm hopeful if he stays healthy, he can be somewhere in that rotation, I think, or at least be a guy that, can be in that Javier Assad role that, maybe a swingman type situation.
Or even if he's a guy that is a shuttle guy, right? Spot starts every once in a while, is ready to go if someone gets hurt. Like those guys have some value too. And if that's the role that Jordan Wicks has to take going into next season, maybe they sign another starter that pushes him out of the opening day rotation. Like having him as depth in that way is a pretty good place to be at if that's one of your depth starters and starting the season at Iowa. I think he's a good pitcher. We don't know if he's going to be a very good major league starter. Again, that's why I give him an incomplete. I don't have any answered questions on him either which way, good or bad. But to have him as a depth piece, if that's the route they take, if he's a depth starter starting the season at Iowa, I think that's a pretty good place for him to be in, for the Cubs to be in, where you're looking at that as a former first round pick who's ready to go, but he's not even on the opening day roster. Like, is he a depth piece? That's not a bad position.
Yeah, I guess it's not where you want your first round pick to end up long term, right? Like that's not where you want him to end up. But if you're going to go out and spend money or do whatever and somehow get Corbin Burns and add him to a rotation that's got Steele and Imanaga and Tyone, well, then I'm okay with it. Like if that's how he starts, then I would say, yes, it is a good thing for the Cubs that's the spot he's at. You just don't want to go 10 years later, look back and say, wow, a lot of our first round picks ended up being shuttle guys, right? Like there's a higher expectation for him personally, and there's a higher expectation for him within the organization. But if that's where it starts next season, it's either because A, he's not healthy again going into the season, which is a big problem, or B, they've made some moves that make the rotation a serious threat going into the season. That's the option you'd prefer if that's where he's going to be. I'm okay with him being that guy if they're adding to the rotation. If it's the same rotation coming back, then I want him in the rotation and I want him healthy.
Yeah. Clearly, I'm talking about. My point was like starting next season, coming off a season in which he was injured basically the whole year. Like that's not a bad position for him to be in going into next season, for the Cubs to be in going into next season. If that's where it goes.
When we tweet the graphic out and everyone attacks me and not either of you, make sure to give me credit. Just credit to me for taking.
You could have given him an incomplete.
But then the graphic is boring. Then the graphic is boring.
And if you want to trade, if you want mine to be a D, so it goes D, incomplete D, because that probably would have, like I said, if I'm forced to give a grade, it's probably a D.
Yeah.
Season.
There he goes.
But the majority of it was because of injuries, and we may get, for instance, if I'm comparing him to Ben Brown was better when he was healthy than Jordan Wicks was when he was healthy. But they're both going to be incompletes in my report card. We'll see who we add to the report cards tomorrow. We're going to check out some baseball games, see if the ex-Cub factor plays another big role in today's games. I think everybody's playing today, right? All the games are back in action. 4 games. So that'll be fun. Yeah. And we'll be back here live at 11:30. I believe tomorrow's show will be in studio.
Yep.
And while you're at it, check out some of that Bears content from London coming back. Not just brags at the Louvre and other places. Check out some of the stuff they're sending back. Good stuff coming from London as the Bears get ready to play out there. Appreciate it. Thanks for checking out the CHGO Cubs podcast. Thanks to our guy, Corey Friedman, for producing and multitasking and running the ones and twos behind the scenes for us today. We appreciate it. Thanks to everybody in the live YouTube chat. Be nice to each other. Be nice to us on social media. I don't want to be back here hearing this stuff again tomorrow. Be nice now. And until
we will.
11:30 on Thursday, fly the W.
We all silly like the mayor.